Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Sam is a birth and postpartum doula and the creator of Endo Made Me Do It. She's also an IVF mom and endometriosis warrior and advocate. She's also a prior education teacher and nanny. So today she's going to be joining us to tell us all about her birth story and kind of the process of what all of it looked like in order to get her to be a single mother by choice, which is super exciting. So yeah, Sam, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm super excited. I think this will be a great addition to the whole birth postpartum mini series that I've got going.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited.
Yeah. So, I'm extra excited because not only are we sharing like your birth and postpartum, but like we said, we're talking about kind of the process of what it was like going through this like as a single mother by choice, which I think is so cool and so amazing. And before we hit record here, I was just saying, I'm like, this would be perfect timing to like cap off our whole Pride Month too. So like, I'm sure a lot of like queer parents will also relate to this because a lot of them have to go through this process to conceive biological children as well. So it's going to be super fun. So anyways, I figured we could start by you telling us a little bit about you, what it was like pre-baby, how you ultimately maybe decided to go through this journey, and we could start from there. So
yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super, super excited to be here. So I'm Sam. I'm a 31-year-old queer mom. I had my daughter via IVF. I have my degree in human services with a certification in substance abuse counseling. I am a birth doula, postpartum doula, like you said, but I am also a nanny and a recovery support specialist. So I work at a recovery home as well. I was in early education for like 10 years. I always say I basically grew up in early education. It was a huge part of my life for a really, really long time. I got my certification through high school. So I went to a tech high school where you were allowed to get, a major you would choose and you would get a certification. So for me, I always said like early education saved me because it was like my one light at the tunnel. To get through those 4 years. So upon graduating, I went right into teaching preschool. And at the same time, I kind of started doing some night courses to get my associate's degree. But at the time, my quality of life was like really, really low. From the age of like 12 to 18, I suffered with like chronic pain that was undiagnosed. I had severe periods. I had crippling anxiety and depression that, was caused from all these health issues that I had struggled with. Like I found myself just in a really low place. But early education was like the one thing that I loved and like kept me going. So it was actually when I started teaching that I met a preschooler's mom who had worked at Children's Hospital. And she was like, "Hey, I think you have endometriosis." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "No, I just have like weird periods. They said it's growing pains. It's fine." Like, and she's like, no, like, I know it's definitely endometriosis. And at that point, like I had never heard that term. I had no idea what it was. So me just being me, I'm like, all right, if you say so. So she's just go get a consult, just go have a conversation. Yeah. And at this point, I would have done anything to get any type of diagnosis, even if there was which there is no cure. I just needed to know what it was.
Right.
So I found myself at Children's where I was diagnosed and had my first laparoscopic surgery at 19. And at that time, that's when I had learned what endometriosis is, which it's just like the lining of your uterus. It's similar to the lining of your uterus, basically implanting outside of your uterus. And it thrives out there. It bleeds. It causes really bad symptoms, infertility, chronic pain, fatigue, hormonal imbalance, just so many irritable bowel syndrome, so many symptoms.
Yeah.
And they had also brought up, infertility could be an issue, but you're young. Get on birth control. You'll be fine.
Right.
The pill's the way to go. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll get on the pill. But they had, made the point of being like, you should consider what life's going to be like for the next couple of years. I'm 19. Like, what? They're like, do you want to have kids? And of course, that was like the one thing I knew I really wanted out of life was to be a mom. Like that
Yeah.
was one thing everybody knew. Like Sam loves kids. She'll watch anybody's kids. I had a million nieces and nephews. Like I loved kids. So I knew I really
Yeah.
wanted to be a mom. And that was a big goal for me. So I was diagnosed with stage 3 endometriosis. And at 21, I had tried to conceive naturally. And that's when I learned that I didn't ovulate. My periods were irregular. And at that point, like my symptoms were back to just being crazy and being super severe and just completely interrupting my life. My OBGYN at the time was phenomenal. She was an incredible woman who was just like, I don't know what to do with you at this point. So
God, that's gotta be like reassuring, but also like, well, then what the
terrifying.
heck do I do?
Right. And I trusted this woman with like my life because she was super honest with me. Like it was all trial and error for everything. It was like, well, let's try this pill and see what happens. Let's try this shot and see what happens. Let's try that. And then finally she was just like, I need you to go see a specialist. Like I can't do anything else for you. And I will forever be grateful for that moment because how often do you hear that from a medical professional who's like, but I'm going to send you somewhere else where they might be able to give you what you need. So she had referred me out to a infertility specialist and was like, hey, either you're going to need another surgery or maybe you can just like go for it. She was like, get some good insurance and just jump on the ride and just see where it takes you. So I was like, okay, fine. Let's just try. So at that point, when I had started to consider IVF, I was single at that point. So I wasn't even like with a partner. So I'd originally started trying to conceive with a partner and then found myself by myself, but still wanting to continue to see like the what if. Like I just felt like there was this timestamp and you have everybody around you, especially the older people in your life, just like, so when are you gonna have babies? So when are you gonna have kids? So what are you gonna do if you can't, and like I was totally okay with adopting or, fostering. But for me, it was the experience itself that I really wanted to experience for myself. So I was just like, we're just gonna go for it and just see what they have to say. I didn't tell anybody. It was actually my secret. My mom didn't even know when I lived with her
Oh
at the
my
time.
gosh.
I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I always say like I was ignorance on fire. I just knew that I was just going to go for it. Like I was such a wing it person that I was like, if the universe is aligning and allowing me to have this opportunity, like I'm just going to take it. So yeah, I went for my first consultation, and we went from there. And that was the beginning of my IVF journey.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Now, how old were you when you started that? And like when you did tell
Mhm.
people that you were like, did you tell people that you were, in the process of it? Or was it once you were pregnant, you were just like, hi, I'm pregnant?
Yeah, basically. So I had my first appointment. It's just like it's such a lengthy process. Like when I had started like my first consultation, I was 22.
Right.
And when I started my infertility treatment, I was 23. So I didn't say anything my first cycle. I didn't even say anything towards like halfway through my second. So it wasn't until my second cycle that I really opened up about it. There was a handful of people who knew just because I was working at a preschool at the time and like my schedule was all over the place and I had to communicate like, hey, these days I have to come in late and these days I have to leave early. So like she was aware of what was happening, my
Mm-hmm.
director, but other than that, like I kept it in my pocket just because I wasn't sure if it was going to be good or bad. And I just felt like I was going to internalize it and not just like dump it on everybody, which was
Yeah.
terrible. And I shouldn't have done that. But, I wanted to make sure that like I was sure before I put such big news out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And being young, yeah, it's nerve-wracking because you don't know what kind of reactions you're gonna get, right? Like I'm
For
sure you
sure.
surround yourself with supportive people, but that doesn't mean that supportive people also don't have those concerns for you.
Hmm.
Especially parents. I think that they're always, worried being like, oh, well, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing, or like, did you think about this or did you think about that? So it can be nerve-wracking.
For
I can only
sure.
imagine. Yeah. So now, what did this whole process kind of look like for you? How did it feel to be doing it like alone then in a way, even after you, told your family and friends and things like that? Like you didn't have a partner that you were going along with it with. So what was
Right.
that like? And then yeah, what was kind of the process like and getting pregnant and the pregnancy and things like that?
Yeah. So after my consult, I went through like all the testing, which is like blood work, genetic testing. They want to know your ovarian function and how your uterus is and all that fun stuff. So we did all that. And then I got the results that my ovaries were just functioning enough to like meet the criteria for IVF. Like you should be functioning at a 10 and you're at a 4. And I
Oh
was like, oh
gosh.
no. So it was basically like, this is the time, like this is it. Um, so that was it for me. So I decided to go forward with it with a known donor. It was important for me that my daughter Annabelle knew her roots. Like I was adopted and I was fortunate enough to know my birth mom's side. Like my adopted mom made sure like she had all those answers for me and she kept that window open because it was an extension of me and therefore it was an extension
Right.
of her. And so I was raised with that. So for me, it was like, I didn't want to just pick a number out of a book, And in the
Yeah.
beginning I was like, well, I'm just going to tell people that I did because I don't want to put too much information out there or tell them I had a donor. It was just, I didn't have a community of people who were going through this with me. I didn't have anybody to relate to. So I was
Yeah.
just going off of like my own fears and insecurities and assumptions. But yeah, I started with a known donor and I was just like so blessed that I had somebody who was willing to do this with me. I did a total of 3 rounds of IVF. I would say, like I said, I was ignorance on fire. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was in for at all. Like, had I known, I probably would have put the brakes on a little bit more instead of just like running full speed. Like it's a marathon. It's not a race. And for me, it was a race and I was just like running for my life. Like,
Right.
I don't know. I was just told to run. So I'm running. Everything was so time consuming. I remember just my whole life being based around a time, an appointment, a time I had to take a med, insert a med, inject a med, put a med on. Like it was just constant. I remember being on the highway giving myself like an injection because I didn't make it home in time and I was stuck in traffic traveling around with my med in a little cooler bag because I had to make sure I took it at the right time.
Right.
There's a lot of blood work and ultrasounds. And as it gets closer to the time of your egg retrieval, they start doing it more frequently. So it becomes even like a day-to-day thing that you're going every single morning, ultrasound, blood work, ultrasound, blood work. Um, and everything was pretty smooth, I would say, for, that first egg retrieval. I went in, it was probably the most pain I'd ever like been into, like with a procedure of some sort. I had no idea how painful an egg retrieval would be. I was super like inflamed and big and sore. And I ended up with like 9 embryos. If I remember correctly, it was 9 embryos that time. So my first pregnancy, they have what they call the 2-week wait. So you go in, you do your egg retrieval, they watch your embryo for a couple of days and tell you the perfect time to come in to do the implantation. And then you have the dreaded 2-week wait of just waiting and praying that like something's working in your body. And then you go in and do blood work. Well, the day I went in to do blood work, I got the call that I had a low positive pregnancy test result. But at the same time, I started bleeding. So that was my first pregnancy, ended in a chemical. After that, I waited like 2 months and went right for my second cycle. Like I was just like, let's do it. I really didn't give myself the time to recover. Like in my head, I was just like, well, that one didn't work, but the next one will. So we went for the next one. And at that time, I found out that we only had 5 embryos. So I'd used one and now I had 4 left out of the 9 that I originally had. And then we went for the second implantation and I made it through the 2-week wait and I got the call that I was pregnant. And then I went in for my first ultrasound at 8 weeks and the heartbeat was very low. So, they were concerned, like, we don't think the baby's going to make it. Like the heartbeat's really low. Like we can just terminate it now. But for me, I couldn't do it. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to ride this out. Like whatever happens, happens. Like I'm just going to let go and just go with it. And then so I went back for my 12-week visit and I found out that the heart had stopped. So that ended up ending in a DNC. And that just like completely changed me. So after that, I kind of just like put the brakes on because I needed to grieve. At that point, I knew like I needed to grieve and I needed to heal. I had opened up during my second pregnancy just because I had started to show, like I really couldn't hide it. So my second pregnancy, I'd started to tell people around my first ultrasound and I really should have waited, but in the moment it just felt so right. And I just like was in the moment and was just like, I'm just going to live in this. And then of course it ended in a miscarriage and then me having to go back and tell everybody at work and to tell my family and my friends. And that was just
Right.
like
It's a whole
heartbreaking,
nother
like
step to the grieving process.
so heartbreaking. And nobody ever warns you about it. Nobody talks about it. You keep going, right? Like life goes on. I was working, I was in school, I was still doing all the things, but like life was just still happening. So I ended up taking close to a year to just kind of recover. And then in the fall of 2016, I was like, you know what? Let's get ready to do it again. Like I just found myself at a place of just feeling really good. I had changed jobs. I went back to school after taking a little break, and I was just ready to go for it again. So this time around, I ended up doing it with another donor. I had this amazing human who was just like so willing, and he was just like, I'm all kitted out, but like I love you and I would totally do this for you. Like you are your family. Like I want to watch you have your family. So yeah, we decided to go for it, and I was so fortunate to have everything go like so smooth, and I got one chance. Everything went great throughout the whole process. I did all the medications and I did all the appointments just like I did the first time around. And then when I went in for my egg retrieval, I got one chance. Like that was it. But I didn't learn about that one until the day of my implantation. They had told me I had 5. And so I was like, oh, here goes
Great,
another
5 eggs.
5 chances.
We're good. Yeah.
We're going to start this all over again. And so I was like, wonderful. Like, you know, if it doesn't work, I still have like all these chances.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but on top of that, your insurance actually maxed out on your medication. So you have to pay for this out of pocket. Oops, sorry. I threw the biggest tantrum of my life. Like the adult tantrum that came out of me, and my mom just sat there so calm. She is like the biggest worry wart, the biggest, oh my gosh. And she just sat there so calm.
I can't. And this process is so expensive. So expensive. As somebody who like is in the queer community myself, like knowing that I want to have children down the line or be pregnant of some type, like it's not that I'm like actively looking into it, but I've looked into it, right? I mean, anyone would. And it's wildly expensive. And for people that are trying to do this alone or are trying to do this in a same-sex relationship or in a relationship where you cannot naturally have children, it's so ridiculous the way that the insurance does it, because insurance, from my understanding and from people I've spoken to is, correct me if I'm wrong, will typically say that you need to be trying for X amount of months. Well, what does trying look like? Am I spending thousands of dollars going through these processes alone or with somebody who I'm not able to physically get pregnant with? And then what? Then you'll finally pay? Like I have to like prove myself.
That's exactly it. And I felt so like the spotlight was on me because, one, I was so young going to these appointments, and you have like all these older people looking at you like, why are you here? And then I'm walking in alone, right? So then they're like, why are you here? You know, and you just, this like light is just on you and you're just like, yeah. And I was just fortunate enough that I had tried in the past, that I was able to walk in and been like, hey, I tried to get pregnant for X amount of time. And he was like, that is what insurance needs to hear. So it just kind of happened that way. Like, but had I not said that, would I have been able to do it? You know, like would I had this opportunity despite having this underlying condition? It's scary. It's scary because I've had people that I know get denied even after they've been, you know, diagnosed with whatever infertility issue they have. And you don't know. So now I'm like, cool, working with kids, you know, you're not like a millionaire that you don't really get the money that you hope you get teaching early education, right?
I was right there.
So I'm like at this job that I don't even really want to be at, making like not great money, but the insurance is phenomenal and I knew I needed it. And then I max out on my medication. So they're basically like, hey, either you just like dive in and we do this tomorrow and like you pay it off eventually, or we don't do it. And I had come this far. So I was just like, I can't not do it. So after all my screaming and crying, my mom was just like, we'll pay it off. It's that simple. Like, we will just pay it off. Like, just do it. Just try. So I went in the next day and everything, like I said, it went so smooth. I had my 2-week wait. Everything came back positive. She was healthy. My like levels were perfect. I had a phenomenal period. I felt the best I had ever felt as an adult, you know, being chronically ill. Like I didn't know what it was like to feel normal. Like I hadn't felt it since I was like 11. So to be in a place where I'm energized and I'm not having to deal with like flares and all these like symptoms that I felt with endometriosis, like I was on top of the world. Like I felt amazing. I was working like 60 hours a week. I was like going on dates. I was going out and hiking and doing yoga and just like living like my best life. I felt so good. It was phenomenal.
That's literally so amazing. And it must be, like you said, so weird when you're not used to that to finally all of a sudden have this and to, after so much trial and error and trial and failure, to be able to be pregnant and like enjoy it. Because so many people don't, and some people do. And so it's that another unknown of how are you going to feel, and to feel so amazing must have been so refreshing.
It was like, I felt so youthful. I mean, despite like that first trimester nausea, after that, I was like golden. I was like, I will take that nausea and this big belly any day. It was great.
Wow. Now, as like your birth approached and postpartum and all of this, like, was there anything specific that you were super set on wanting or like not wanting to do? And then how did you set yourself up for, success when you got home with a brand new baby, being, by yourself and doing all of this? Did you have a lot of family present? What was that kind of process like?
Yeah, I didn't have a ton of support. Like I had my mom, I've lived with her, and I have two brothers, and I had like a very small village of people who were just there my whole pregnancy. They were there for like that call that I got pregnant. They were there for my gender reveal. They were there when I was in labor. Like they were my little village of people that were so supportive and so ready to just like jump in and just be hands-on with me. So I had them, and I was super, super fortunate to have them. But I didn't really have a postpartum plan. I feel like when you've had so many losses, you're so consumed with being in that moment and like
Right.
just worrying on, let's just make it to this next month. Let's just make it to this next milestone. Let's just make it to this next ultrasound. And I was so obsessed with that my postpartum plan was just like, yeah, well, we'll go on a little leave and then, we'll figure it out. Like I was just so set on just making it through my pregnancy. You know what I
Right.
mean? And any dream that I had before my birth, everyone was like, what is wrong with you? Which now I'm like, I totally could have had things my way. Like I wanted a water birth. I wanted a natural birth. Like I wanted things to be so different than how they ended up, just for the simple fact that people around me were like, no, we're not doing that. And I was like, okay, I guess we're not doing that. I didn't have someone with me to be like, okay, well, let's look into it and see what that looks like. Or let's see what our options were. Everyone within my community, my circle of friends were like, no, dude, you go into labor, you go to the hospital.
You go
So
to
I
the
was like,
hospital and you have a baby. Right.
okay, I'll just go to the hospital and let them just tell me what to do. So like that was really the plan. I had planned on taking 4 to 5 weeks off, assuming I would have a natural delivery, a vaginal delivery. I had anticipated only needing, a couple weeks, and then I could go back part-time and things would just be so smooth. And my mom was there to help the baby, and it would just be, smooth sailing from there. And that was far from what it turned out to be.
Right. So what did this turn out to be? So tell us about what labor and birth and then early postpartum was like and felt like and all the
Yes.
things.
So Annabelle was due November 17th. I went into my OB/GYN appointment on November 9th, and she was like, oh, honey, this baby is not coming till after Thanksgiving. And I was like, no, I have been waiting for these foods. Like, I need this baby out. You said the 17th. And mind you, like, yeah, I'd worked with kids forever, like down to like, I was a traveling caregiver throughout my pregnancy. So like I worked with like 10-day-old babies up to like 17-year-old kids with like, disabilities. I've worked over 200 families at this point. I had no idea what to expect during a birth. Not a clue. Like nobody prepared me, but I also didn't prepare myself. Instead, I was like, you know what? We're just going to wait till it happens because I don't know how this human's coming out of my body, but it is. So, okay. So I go in on the 9th and she's like, you got a couple more weeks. Like nothing's happening. Baby's not ready. So I'm like, great. That night I go out on a date and I felt crampy and was like, oh, I don't really feel good. So like I walked around the block a little bit and then I went home for the night. And then I woke up at like 5:45 with these cramps. So I'm thinking maybe I have to go to the bathroom or something. I go to the bathroom and I'm like, oh, these are like consistent, but like they're going away and coming back. And then I was like, oh no, I know what this is. 6 o'clock hits and I'm like, yeah, these are 3 minutes apart. Like they started instantly were 3 minutes apart. So I go out into my little bouncy ball and start going on my yoga ball. Like, all right, we're just going to bounce through this, because I knew if I woke my mom up, she was going to be like, we're going to the hospital right now. And I was not
Right.
ready. I knew I wasn't ready. I knew it wasn't time yet. And I was like, if I go to the hospital, I kept thinking, is they're going to make me lay down? I don't want to. That was all I kept thinking about, was like, I'm going to be confined. You know, you see the videos of like women always like dancing and like moving their bodies and wanting to move. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, that's what I'm going to want to do. I'm just going to dance this baby out like that. In my head, that's how I thought this was going to play out. So it hit like maybe like 6:30, and my brother's like, what are you doing? I was like, yeah, contractions. And he was like, oh no, you are not having this baby here. So he goes and he wakes my mom up. She comes out like ready to go in her house dress, running out the door, still sleeping. And I'm like, where are you going? And she's just like, oh my God, we have to go. And she's like crying and hysterical. And I'm like, Mom, go make a cup of tea. Go put some pants on. Go figure. Well, we got a little bit of time. And
You're like, slow your roll.
Right. And like, it was just so funny. In those moments, I'm like, man, I wish I would have had a camera to just record it, because I could not stop laughing. This whole time I'm like dying laughing, in so much pain, but like could not stop laughing at how like how emotional she was. I'm like, you have brought humans into this world. You have raised so many kids, and look at you right now.
Right.
So she goes to the room and is like, don't do anything crazy. My friend's like, get in that shower. This is your chance to shower. And I'm like, cool. So I run in the shower. My mom's yelling at me the whole time to get out. 7 o'clock hits. We're heading to the car. My water starts to break. So at first I'm like, oh, I'm leaking. And she's like, the water's breaking. And she's like screaming, running to the car. We get in her car and the rest just like gushes out. So she's calling 911. I'm calling my best friend, like, I don't want to go. And she's like, you're going. And my mom is on the phone hysterical. And they're like, you need to like touch the fluid, see what it looks like. We're both fighting over who's going to shove their hands in my pants. Cause I'm like, I'm not doing it. I don't know what's going on down there. I haven't seen down there in so long. No way. So I'm literally cracking up. She's sobbing next to me and I'm like laughing hysterically. The ambulance comes. It's a Friday morning, mind you. So like 7:30 hits and they're like, oh, honey, there's no way we're getting into the city. Like you have to go to the closest hospital. So I don't even get to go to the hospital I want to go to and be with my OBGYN. I have to go to just whoever is there. By the time I got there, they were monitoring me and my contractions were still 3 minutes apart. So they're like, you know, things are happening. I wasn't dilating at all. Like nothing was happening. So they give me a medication. To this day, I still don't know what it was that made me feel like I had too much wine, because they needed me to rest to be prepared for like when I do start to dilate. Only
that is just so mind-boggling.
Yes. And the worst part is it didn't even help me rest. It just like knocked me out in between contractions. Like I still felt every contraction. And looking back now, I'm like, I wish I would have just said, no, I'm okay. I'll just do this. Or, you know, like what are my other options here?
Or what happened to, you know, I really want to go to the hospital that I want to go to, right? Like, yeah, your contractions are 3 minutes apart, but at the same time, like, trust yourself, right? Like, but it's, they see this first time parent and they're like, we just need to go to here and we just hear 3 minutes and, you know, this is where we go and that's what we do. And fair enough. But, you know,
once like we know what's best.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's just that I think there's so many medical professionals in the world that are just pushy in ways that they don't need to be pushy in, I guess is really what it comes
for sure. And I feel like it becomes so much more like such a medicalized thing, like procedure almost. Like it wasn't even like, oh, this is this natural thing that we've been doing for bajillions of years.
Literally forever.
Anywhere, everywhere people are having babies. And instead it's like, oh yeah, so you need to like go sit down so we can monitor you. And I remember being like, my body just wants to move. Can I just move? I just want to rock. I just want to bounce. Like, can I move? And they were like, yeah, after you sit here for a while and we monitor you. And I'm like, okay, fine. And here's my mom, like they said it, so do it.
She didn't know anything.
So now she's here and I'm like, okay, like everybody's telling me this is what I have to do. So I do it and I get this medication. And honestly, I don't know. I remember coming to and going like over and over again. It was a blur. It was a blur for hours. And then eventually they came in, didn't even ask me if I wanted an epidural. They just gave me one. And at this point, I'm like, oh, well, I've been here long enough. Like, I guess I'm staying now. So they come in and they do an epidural, which I was like, okay. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I was just so tired at that point that I was like, all right, I've been doing this all day and nothing's happening. So I guess this is what comes next. So I got the epidural. We kept waiting. I was dilating super, super slow. Like 3 here, 4 hours later. Like it was just so bad. And then I had to go for a second epidural. because the pain was so bad and I felt everything like hours later. So then they go for the second one. And now I'm just like all over the place. Just like, move your legs. I'm like, I am. They're like, but you're not. Like, oh, okay. Like I wasn't there. I was there, but I wasn't there.
Right.
So I feel like there's, out of the 16 hours I was in labor, I could probably really tell you about 4. I don't really know about like the in-betweens. So then they give me Pitocin and they try to induce me. They tried a couple times, and every time they'd give me Pitocin, Annabelle's heart rate would drop. So they would come in and be like, well, this is what's going on. And then they'd leave the room and her heart rate would pick back up again. And so
Right.
they'd say, okay, we're going to do it again. And then they did it again. And then finally they came in and they were just johnnied up. They didn't, again, no choice. It was just, hey, by the way, you have a fever and there's an infection and now we're just going to take you in and we're just going to do a C-section. So I wasn't even like prepared for a cesarean. It wasn't on my to-do list. Like looking back now, I'm like, I bet there were a million different things we could have done differently to make things maybe move along naturally.
Right. As a birth doula now, you look back at it and you're like,
yes,
what?
yes.
What?
Yes. Yes. I remember like taking my, like the workshop to become a doula and was just like, my jaw was on the floor the whole time that they were just like educating us about like what you can and can't do and positions. And I was like, what?
When did this happen and where was it? Right. Because they looked at, like, let's be real, they probably looked at you, saw a young single like parent, first time parent, and we're like, this is what we're gonna do. This is what's easy for us. And it's so horrible that that's what happens.
For sure. And the hospital that I delivered at, in previous years, there had been like a couple of women who had died during cesarean. So for me, like that's all I'm thinking in the back of my head. And then it's playing out that like women of color are more likely, you know, to have some fatality in like giving birth. And like, so I'm just like, okay, like I have to go in for this surgery. And my mom just starts crying. Like she's just crying. And I'm like, it's okay. And she's just like, I'm not going to choose here. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. And I was like, we're just going to do this. Like, we got this. We can do this. I was also heavily medicated. So I was like, this is going to be fine. Don't you worry. Baby will be here any minute, finally. So yeah, I go into the OR and it was freezing. I remember just shaking and being like, this is never ending. It was just like the longest thing I've ever been a part of. Just like, is she here yet? What's happening now? And my mom was just like, at my head, just terrified that I was shaking the whole time. And I was like, no, it's just like really cold. Like I'm fine. And then I heard the little cry and they brought her over and I saw her for a split second and then she was gone and my mom was gone. Like before I could be like, don't go. She was like, baby, I'm with baby and left me. So now they're like, you know, they're closing me back up and I get like that 5 minutes of like skin to skin, which was wonderful. Like she was perfect. She latched perfectly. And then they were like, hey, we have to take her. We have to give some antibiotics into her. And so my mom just went wherever she went. I just remember waking up in a corner and they're like, yeah, we have a bed for you. We'll put you in there. And just being in a corner by myself for hours. Eventually I ended up in a room and my mom came in like sobbing with my daughter. I was like, what happened? And she was just like, they stuck her so many times because they couldn't get an IV into her. And eventually she's like, I just stood over her little body and like refused to let anybody do it until they got a doctor. And so like, here I am trying to come to and recover. And then here's my poor little baby, a couple hours into life, like being poked away and my mom having to choose which way she's going to go. And she chose to go with the baby, of course. And just came back in and was like, so traumatized by this experience. Like she was just like, I cannot believe what I just like witnessed. And so at this point it's like 2 a.m. and my mom had neck surgery and was like, I can't stay with you. Like I can't stay the night. So what are you going to do? But I called a friend who came and I was fortunate enough that she was like, I'm coming, I'm on my way. And she came and spent the night with me. And she just would just hand me the baby and I would like try to nurse her for a little bit, put her back, hold her. And that was how I spent 2 nights in the hospital of just like holding my baby. There was no nursery. They were just like, nope, she just stays with you in this little box next to your bed. And you just have to figure it out with your C-section. And I remember being like, I'm supposed to be able to get up. Like I'm supposed to just
figure it out. Like,
yes.
Knowing that you have support, but not continuous support. And then being told this is your child, but typically a support partner or person would be able to get up and hand you this baby. But now you're going home and like, not only did you say you don't have a postpartum plan, but now you're going home recovering yourself and having to take care of this new human, like that's
Yes.
impossible.
Yes, it was so scary. And I remember at some point, like in the hospital, I had asked them, like, can you just like take her for a couple hours? Because she was instantly what they call the hands-on baby. Like she just
Mhm.
loved to be snuggled into you
Yeah.
and hold, like you held her, she'd be fine. I was like that for 2 days straight. Like I just didn't put her down. I just held her because I was like, if I put her down, I'm not going to be able to reach her. And so
Right.
I'm just going to sit like this. And I was so tired. And I was like, can you guys just like take her for a little bit? So they took her for a couple of hours and then they'd bring her right back. Um, but I remember just being like, how am I supposed to do this? Like, how am I supposed to like, I can barely survive right now in the hospital. And like day 3 came and they were like, well, do you want to go home or do you want to stay? And I was like, oh, let me go home. Like, let me go home where I can at least be comfortable and figure out how to work around this because,
Navigate it all.
a cesarean was just like, wasn't part of my plan at all.
No, no. And now, was Annabelle good after she was born? I know they had to poke and pry her apparently, which they probably
Mm-hmm.
didn't actually have to do, but they did. Um,
Right.
what was that like? Was she okay? Kind of what happened with all of that?
She was totally fine. She did her 2 rounds of antibiotics and she was totally fine. Like healthy as a little pea could be, like was on her
Awesome.
way, like amazing. Me on the other hand, like my postpartum anxiety, the anxiety that I felt that no one told you feel when you bring a baby home was like through the roof. Like for anything. Like I can't hold her because I'm gonna drop her. I can't I can't go on the couch because then like what if the couch breaks and it just caves in, or oh my god, the Christmas tree, it's gonna light on fire and then we're all gonna die here. Like my anxiety was so bad. I was so fortunate that she was such a great baby and was so easy. Like one of the things I said I would never do was have her in my bed. She's still in my bed till this day. Like it's still a thing, but it's because she ended up having really bad reflux at 2 months. And I had no idea what it was. I just knew my happy go lucky baby would scream bloody murder at night unless I was sleeping sitting up with her. So that's what I would do. And then I brought her to the doctors and they're like, yeah, we'll put her on some heavy duty meds. And I was like, no, like that's not a solution for this tiny little body. Like there has to be something else I can do. So it was like weeks, if not months, of me like trying to advocate for her to be like, there has to be something else we can do. Like I don't feel comfortable giving her all these meds, but I'm also like exhausted and need to sleep and don't know what to do. And, all the moms in like my Facebook mom groups were like, we're right there with you. Like we totally support you. Like just let the baby sleep in your bed. So I just like, I caved. It was just me and her. I was breastfeeding exclusively for the first 6 weeks. I was so fortunate that went like so smooth for us. So she was just so easygoing other than the reflux, which, lasted a couple of months. And then we were able to find a solution for that. Like it was wonderful. She was so good.
Oh, that's awesome. It makes me happy to hear that you were able to navigate it, which not that you couldn't, because, once you're kind of put in that situation, you don't really have another choice, but
Right.
you were able to navigate it, and that's amazing. Um, Now I've been asking everybody this question. It's such a loaded question that like
Mm.
I ask everybody when they come on, but if you had one piece of advice and one product recommendation that you could give a new parent,
Mm.
what would you give? What would you say?
Oh, okay. So for my one piece of advice, I would say is like, don't be afraid to say no. Like, don't be afraid to say no to anybody at all. Like, if it doesn't align with you, what you want, like this is your story. This is your birth, your chapter. Like you get to narrate it however you want, unless medically something is up and you have no other choice. Okay, cool. But like, don't be afraid to change the plans if you need to. Don't be afraid to rewrite it a million times if you need to. Like, there's no right way to do it. Like, just don't be afraid to be like, this is not what I want and to stick to it. Like, it's totally okay.
Yeah.
But it's also totally okay for it to completely change last minute.
Right.
And you're like, this actually isn't what I want. Like, that is totally okay too. I really wish, like, looking back, those are the things that I would have done differently, was to just really stick to what I really wanted to do. And then my one product recommendation, if you're breastfeeding and like you're just started breastfeeding, the Haka is phenomenal for if you're pumping or nursing. It just catches that extra milk on the other side. Was like my saving grace. I swore by that product, and I love to baby wear. I was so big on wearing Annabelle to do things like strap that
Especially with
baby
the
to you.
reflex.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, strap that baby to you. Like it is okay to just wear your baby and do the things. Like that is how I survived the first couple months. And I think it was just like the best thing I could have done.
Oh, that's so amazing. Literally so amazing and so true. I love it all. Um, Well, thank you so much for joining me. If people wanted to kind of find you, I know you do both birth and postpartum work as well, and maybe we'll do
Yes.
a whole nother episode on more of a, professionally type topic to help
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
But I felt like your story was just so good to share. Like, I feel like we can really hit so many different types of families and types of people, and that's like the goal. So I
For
appreciate you
sure.
coming and sharing that. But now, how can people find you, and where can they get in touch, and what kind of services do you do and provide, and where, and all the things?
Yeah, so you can find my Instagram's Endo Made Me Do It. The me is MI. My website will be back up this weekend. It's also Endo Made Me Do It. On Facebook, I don't have my Facebook page up just yet, but I do have like my personal page, which is Sam OR. You can find me there. And as for services, oh my gosh, I do everything. I'm just like all over the place. I do photography, I do birth work, I do postpartum, I do baby organizing and prep. I also share curriculum that I love and, tips and tricks for IVF and endometriosis. So yeah, like my DMs are always open. I always have people reaching out and I'm always like so happy to share. So I was really excited to come on to be able to share, my story as a single mom by choice. I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity and I'm so happy we got to connect and I look forward to connecting again.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.